So I know this is a very hot topic within the Airsoft community, whether or not the game of Airsoft is considered a sport. But before we look at what is a sport and what isn't, I really think it's important to recognize that Airsoft maybe falls in that middle ground, that gray area in between. Now, before we start today's video, I think it's important to define just exactly what a sport is. The Oxford Dictionary defines a sport as an activity including physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Based off that, I know a lot of you are going to say, case closed, Airsoft is a sport. But I think we also need to look at what is Airsoft at its core. Are we considering Airsoft that's just something with the replicas that we use for the game? Or is Airsoft more about the game itself rather than the replicas that we use? And I think it really does depend on the event that you go to. But I think one of the biggest issues that we have with Airsoft as a gaming system is that it's hard to be competitive in a way that is effective and consistent. The reason why I say that is, first off, one of the biggest indicators in Airsoft of the kind of competition aspect. Are you basing it off of how many players you get out? Are you basing off of it objectives captured? I think that can be really gray and vary from event promoter to event promoter, and that's what makes Airsoft difficult to be a sport in my opinion. Because if you think about it in the terms of like getting other players out, unfortunately, it's very, very easy to cheat in Airsoft. Airsoft is a game based entirely off of honor, and unlike other similar hobbies like paintball, for example, there's a bright red, bright green, orange, yellow, whatever color paint you're using. When you get hit by that paintball, you're going to see it, and it's very visually indicative to a referee that's watching or just other players around you. Sure, you can wipe off the paint in paintball and try to cheat that way, but it's a little bit more effective in those terms, in my opinion, which makes it better suited for competition, because within competition, you have to have rules, and I think that's where we open up a huge can of worms in this conversation that truly changes the answer at the end of the day. The reason why I say that is there's so many different ways to play the game of Airsoft. There's Speed QB, which is highly competitive, and in my opinion, one of the best ways to do competitive Airsoft. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But then you have, your standard open play. You have kind of the localized Milsim events. You have regional people like Gun Gamers Productions, Third Coast Airsoft. And then you have the really, really big games. You have American Milsim. You have Bad Blood, which gets out 1,200 people for a game. You have Milsim West, which is an experience unlike any other. And the one common thing between all of these different events and all of these different play styles is the replicas that we use. But beyond that, it's pretty loosely regulated and loosely connected beyond that. If you think about the rules at an open play versus the rules at a Milsim West, they're completely different. And I think that's one of the big issues, is there really isn't a standardized rule set in Airsoft. And I think that having a standardized set of rules makes competition easier. One of the things that I really like about a player at Milsim West is I feel like the game isn't about Airsoft itself. It's about the challenge, the physical exertion, which is part of that definition of a sport that we talked about earlier. But one of the key things about Milsim West is they're pretty clear about it, that nobody wins at Milsim West. It's not a competition. And I think that I really like that mentality, because by driving away competition from Airsoft, I think that kind of filters out some people that are just out there to play to win no matter what, and can end up ruining the experience of other players out there. Now, sure, there are other event promoters out there that do have winners and losers, like Lion Claws and American Milsim, and they have point systems or whatever they've come up with. But I really don't like these because, one, they're not transparent. For example, if you're watching football or baseball, you know how people score runs or how they score points in the game, because it's not only the same from event to event, but also the conditions for scoring are always the exact same. Like if you hit a home run or an RBI in baseball, that is always a point, versus with Milsim games, you can get points for performing certain actions. It's just kind of behind the scenes, and that's something that I've never liked, is because there's not a lot of openness. It's one of those situations where the points just really, they don't matter at the end of the day, which I hate to say, but I feel like that doesn't make Airsoft very competitive, and because of that, I don't believe that Airsoft can really be a sport in that capacity. I think the closest that we're going to get to Airsoft falling under that definition of a sport within our hobby is smaller games like Speed QB, for example. What I really like about Speed QB, although it's not my personal cup of tea as a player, I appreciate that they have a dedicated rule system that never changes. They have some regularity and some regulations for the field that you play on, and as well, just the rules and the scale I think are better for competitiveness. Unfortunately, there can't be a ref every 15 feet to call hits at a large-scale milsim event. As much as some players would absolutely love that to avoid the issue of hit calling, it's just never going to happen. The nice thing about Speed QB, and this is kind of the similar thing with like speedball and paintball, is because it's a small arena type competition, it's easier to actually regulate the rules and make sure that people are following them, and that's something that I really enjoy. So I definitely think that Speed QB is the best sort of way because there's uniformity in the rules, there's uniformity in what the players are bringing, and ultimately I think that it's just a more balanced and better way to do competition in the hobby of Airsoft than large-scale games. But I think that's the beauty of Airsoft, really. Like, you can go to whatever game you want to, and there's some Airsoft games that have zero competition in them. I mean, like this shirt that I'm wearing right now from Survive Omega. It's a game where you pretend to be in the apocalypse, and there is no winners, there is no losers, and really the game's kind of just about LARPing in the woods for a weekend, more so than playing with Airsoft. Like at the last Omega game that I went to, if I fired more than 50 BBs, I'd be surprised. So like, I think that's the beauty of Airsoft. It can be whatever you want it to be. If you want to go to events where it's closer to a sport and it's more about the competition, you absolutely can, and that's great. But if you want to go out and LARP with your friends or just play with cool BB guns and, you know, maybe like you're the kind of player that goes out there to like personally win, like you want to get a lot of kills, you want to like really trick out your replica to make it the best that it can be, you know, you yourself can win in your mind and you can have a good time. And that's totally cool. It's all about what you see in Airsoft that you like, finding that event promoter or open play or, you know, whatever you want to do that's your personal cup of tea in Airsoft and playing that. And I think this is a big enough hobby that there's room for different ways to play Airsoft. But I want to know what you think about this. Do you think that Airsoft is a sport? Make sure to leave a comment down below or join my Discord server and tell me why my takes about this topic are wrong. That'll be linked down in the description below. But that is going to do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. My name has been Lane, and I'll see you all in the next video.